Hello, awesome patrons. I hope you're doing well. It feels like I haven't recorded a video in such a long time. It probably is at least 2 weeks, I guess. But I haven't done a voiceover in a while. The last video that I published to you guys, I think I was doing real-time narration. Anyways, that's besides the point. So I'm using a new paper to me. I know it's not new, but it's a paper I found at HomeSense, believe it or not, in my area. It's called Montmartre. I'm not sure where it's from. Oh, it's a German paper. I'm looking at the cover of the pad. It is 140 pound weight. It says it's rough tooth. It is, and it kind of isn't. I'm used to Arches rough grain, which is a lot more lumpy bumpy. But it does have texture, definitely. And you'll see that once I start playing with the pencils. So I guess this piece is a little bit more like a mixed media than a watercolor project, because I have used probably to the same level both watercolor and colored pencil. I like to do that. It kind of gives me, I want to say, a little bit of freedom, in the sense that if I'm not exact with the watercolor painting, I can always correct with the colored pencils, if that makes any sense. I find it makes my job a little bit easier. And the reason why I'm using watercolor to begin with is to fill in those holes. If I were to use just straight up colored pencil on this paper, it wouldn't work, because you would see the tooth of the paper. You would still see the white, because the colored pencil does not go into the grooves of the paper. And because it is supposedly rough tooth, that would be even worse. You can probably get away with this if you were to use hot pressed satin paper, or satin grain, I want to say, but then that kind of would be a little bit too expensive. If I'm going to be using just colored pencils, I would use a Bristol paper, which is super smooth. But anyways, I kind of digress, but I think it's all useful information in any case. So at the very beginning, I showed you the color palette I'm going to be using for this, and in truth, I was doing 3 pieces all at once. And the reason for this is that I need to send out some artwork to some of my upper tier patrons, and I kind of batched them up, and so I owe them 3 pieces each, and so I'm doing triptychs this month. I shared one with you a couple of weeks ago, and this is the second one. And at the same time, I am kind of like trying out a new thing. I want to get into the sticker business. Sounds very business-like, but it's not. There's a lot of artists who are branching out their artwork just to get an extra revenue stream, I guess. And I've always been curious about stickers. I'm a sticker user myself, and so I thought, okay, well, let's see if my art translates well into the sticker realm. So I've already done one collection, which is not what I'm doing right now, and that collection is very Christmassy, very festive, and it's got a whole different feel. It's more cartoonish, I want to say. And because I don't want to only do themed or not themed, sorry, seasonal stickers, I thought it'd be nice at the same time that I launched this whole thing to do something more, well, not a seasonal. Wow, I use big words. So I thought of doing some botanicals, and this collection in particular is going to be called Houseplant. Now, I have to say that when I was finished with this particular painting, I realized that maybe it was a little, not fancy, but it was not what I had in mind. I want my stickers to be a little bit on the, not primitive side either, but less detailed. And so I'm going to ask you at the end of this video if you see this as a sticker. I kind of polled a little bit on Instagram, and it seems to be favorable to, I think it's like 80-something%. But anyways, I still want your opinion. And yeah, anyways, let's go back to the painting. So the flower pot, it's too bad we're kind of past that stage now, but I wanted to imitate concrete. And I think I was quite successful at it. I mixed in some Titan Buff, a little bit of gray, which I forgot to add on my palette. But all the supplies will be listed in the supplies list, and you'll get that as attachment. And a little bit of sepia as well, kind of like to give that rough texture. And I think it was successful. And I really enjoyed doing that. It was fun. And what I did is I just did a very basic outline of the flower pot, and then I wet the whole pot with just clean water, and then I just dropped the colors in. And I'm using a super thin brush to do the leaves. This is, I believe, number 2. Yes, it is number 2 round by Black Velvet, their silver line. Whoa, I'm not sure what happened here, but wow, okay. It's very white. I must have done something to my settings. Yeah, so what I ended up doing for the leaves is using 2 different greens. And again, this is just the base. And then I'm going to go over with colored pencils. But the greens are green gold and sap green. And here I'm just adding, what's that called? A shadow. Yes, underneath the flower pot, assuming that my light comes from the top left corner. And here I'm just showing you how I go about selecting my colored pencils. I usually use the swatch that I make for each painting, and then I just color over the swatches just to see what it would look like before I commit to the painting. And as far as the shading is concerned, I have a habit of starting with either my darkest color or my medium value. I know some people like to start with the light one. I don't know why I do this. There must be a reason, but I'd be very hard pressed to explain that to you. I'm being very candid here, guys. I don't want to do too many voiceovers. I usually do a lot and correct and go back, but it takes too long, so hopefully I'm not going to get lost in my explanations and you won't feel that it's too babbly. But yeah, so going back to the shading, I start with, if I have 3 colors, usually I start with my medium value, and then I either take the lightest value and go over everything I've done and then add in the dark, or I add in the dark and then finally I go over with the lightest value over everything. But I have to say as well, it's kind of I go back several times. I adjust and readjust until I get the desired effect. On this one in particular, I was struggling a little bit because you can see I don't have crisp lines, and that's because of the tooth of the paper, which is understandable, and I don't know why I didn't think of that before. But nevertheless, I'm kind of liking the texture that it gives me on the leaves. Now, I'm not crazy about the scraggly edges. I don't know how to say this, but the unclean edges that it created where I shaded, because I kind of have like the clean lines of the watercolor where I did not add any shading, and then I have these lumpy bumpy edges where I added the shading. So in my head it doesn't make sense. It should be uniform all around. But what I did was, you'll see in a bit, I will use the white colored pencil to go around the edges, the side where the light would hit it. And not only did it create that beautiful, almost realistic look, but it helped blend in the edges as well, the edges of the leaves. So yeah, that's how I sort of corrected it. As for the colored pencils themselves, I use Prismacolor Premier for most, well, for the majority except for one. The white is a Caran d'Ache, but you'll have all the numbers and specifics on the supplies list again. I can tell you, however, for the majority of the leaves, I have used Lime Peel, Dark Green, and Dark Umber, which is my darkest value. And you'll notice there are two leaves that are colored differently. And for these two, I used Marine Green. So this is what I was talking about earlier, about blending the edges with the white pencil. And when I was doing this, I was kind of like, my pencil was positioned halfway, how can I explain this? I didn't stay inside the lines. I kind of blurred the edge, which means that parts of the pencil was on the white side, on the white of the paper, in essence. And I think that gives it that beautiful glowy look at the same time. I really like the effect. It was the first time I'm doing that. I don't know why I did not do this before, because I really do love this effect. It was just something I decided to try, and I kind of like that. I also did that on parts of the stems. And this pencil is not the Prismacolor Premier, as I've explained before. It is actually a Pablo by Caran d'Ache, and I really like it. The lead is not as soft as a Prismacolor Premier. It's not so waxy. It reminds me a little bit of the Faber-Castell, but a little bit creamier, so it's kind of like in between. And it really works well. I've enjoyed it. So for the flower pot, of course, because my light source is coming from the top left, the right side of the pot should be darker. And so I'm going to darken that with the dark umber. And I'm not sure if you can see this, but I'm kind of like doing little circular motions, but they're not circles, they're kind of like ovals. And this is just something that comes naturally to me. This is the motion that I do, and when I do this, I usually move the whole arm just so that I can get just so that my ovals are a little bit more uniform, I guess. I hope this makes sense. It does in my head. But I also like the fact that because of the texture of the paper, it gave me that beautiful grainy look, and I think it just adds to the concrete look that I wanted to give it. I'm looking at my pot now and I'm realizing that it's a little bit crooked. The part that touches the ground, it's lopsided. Anyways, it doesn't matter. I've also created some kind of a ledge on the top part of the pot. It's meant to be some sort of like it's not straight up with just a band. I wanted it to look like a rounded border, but I'm not sure I was successful at that either. There's a few things, you know, it's funny, whenever I finish a piece, it's not whenever I finish a piece, but especially when I edit the video and I actually have the chance to analyze my movements and what's going on as opposed to being busy creating it, I notice things. It's so weird. It's kind of fun at the same time. But I don't want to analyze too much my work either. I just find it's interesting. Oh, getting back to the stickers. I'm going to apply a background to this, but if I were to turn this into a sticker, it would not have the shadow on the ground nor the color in the background, because what we'll end up doing is the sticker will be cut around the pot and the leaves. Otherwise it would have to be either an oval sticker or a circle sticker. So anyways, if you have any thoughts on that, please let me know in the comments, because I'd really like to have your feedback. I think it's important, and well, you guys are helping me going through this artistic journey, so I feel that you are an important part also of the process, and I really do value your opinions. For the background, I'm using Cascade Green, which I have diluted quite considerably. I wanted the background light. I also wanted to have it super patchy, not a flat, seamless background. I did not tape my work or the paper to a board, nor did I stretch it. So for me at this point, to add a lot of water to have like a beautiful blended background would have buckled the paper so much, and this paper buckles quite considerably, so I didn't want to do that. So I'm using a very fine brush to go in between the leaves. It doesn't do a perfect job, and like I said, I wanted to have this uneven background. I think it looks more interesting as well. So the small brush helped getting into the nooks and crannies, but it also helped taking my time and create that variegated background that I wanted. So while I'm working on this background, I'm going to give you a heads up. You are going to want to listen to the upcoming Patreon exclusive vlog, because I will be changing the rewards again. However, they're going to be a lot more interesting, because I think that my rewards have become stale and I don't want to give out content that people are not interested in. And so I was trying to figure out how to do that, and I think I came up with a few ideas that you're going to like. The $2 and $5 membership levels are not changing, they're staying as is, but the changes will happen starting from your category, the $10 ones upwards, and so I hope you'll like them. So the changes will happen in a couple of days as well. I'm adding some highlights with Dr. P.H. Martin's Pen White ink. My beloved Copic opaque white ink has gone totally dry on me, and it's rather expensive, so I'm gonna wait to restock. I already had that Pen White by Dr. P.H. Martin's, and I like it. I mean, it's more fluid, definitely. Maybe it's not as opaque, but quite honestly, I don't see a huge difference between the two of them. So I have it, and plus this bottle comes with a dropper, which I like. So I am lightening it a little bit one side of the main stem. And for the background, I thought the background was very cool. Some of the leaves are very cool, and I thought it needed a little bit of pop. So I wanted to add some light to the background, I want to say. Yeah. So I'm using Jaune Brilliant #1 for this in just a few areas, not the entire background, obviously. But I think it helped. And again, that also emphasizes that patchy background that I was going for. So one thing I forgot to tell you about the background is if you're going back in and add a little bit of a darker value where the leaves are, where the stems are, try not to think of the branches as a stop for the dark color, meaning that if you're going to add a dark color on one side of a stem, try to carry it over to the other side as well, because the parts that you want to add, like a shading against a walnut, it doesn't pertain to the branch. I hope that makes sense. I'm really having a hard time explaining, but I think you get the gist. I wanted to add a little bit of more definition to some of the lines, so I'm using a gel pen. This is a brown gel pen that I bought at Muji 2 summers ago, I think. It just helps define some of those lines. So that's why, because I've used so many different things besides the watercolor paint, I've decided to think of this piece as a mixed media piece more than watercolor. Although the very first layer is all watercolor, but yeah. I think the combination of the white ink and the gel pen makes the stems stand out a little bit more. Because although I do love the flower pot, I didn't want it to be just the only thing that we see. So by strengthening the definition of the branches and the leaf, I think it helped. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this at the beginning. I probably did and I forgot. But I was working on 3 different pieces at the same time. You'll see all 3 of them towards the end. But you're going to see me work on another one of the pieces, because when I was done with the whole painting, I felt it needed a little bit more, not of an emphasis, but for me it was too blue and green. There was too much of it, and I needed, even though I have the yellow in the background, I felt there was something missing. And I remember a few years ago, I went to Donna Downey Studios. Gosh, that was a long time ago. That was 5 years ago. And we were doing this painting with pen pastel. I was painting a face. And I remember I was using blues and greens. And I remember that somehow I reached for the purple. And I incorporated that in there. And it was such a it was almost like an aha moment. And I remember a few years after that, someone was saying that a good color to shade faces is purple or a grayish purple. And I'm like, what if I use that? So I reached into my Prismacolor pencil jars and I saw this dark grape, which is kind of like the only color I could see myself using. And I tried it on this piece that you're seeing right now, which is one of the 3 pieces, because I wanted to test it out on another one besides the one that I was using for the video. And I really like the effect. So this is dark grape. It's quite purple, but I went over it with the white pencil thinking it might tone it down, but it made it even more purple. Like it brightened up the purple. So I wasn't too crazy about that. So on the other pieces, I used it a little bit differently. But I really do like that color purple in there. I think it adds a good contrast. It breaks the monotony of all that green, and it's actually Cascade green turns into a little bit of a blue, but it's not a defined blue, so it's mostly all green. So I think the purple helps it. And so I'm going in between some of these branches, not too much, just a little bit, just enough. And I'm using a paper stump as well. This is dry paper stump. It has no OMS on this, no mineral spirit. But it does blend a little bit. So it helped reduce the texture that I was getting. Not that it was a big deal, but I don't know, I wanted whatever was on the background to be a little bit softer than what was, you know, on the flower, the leaves and the pot. So the paper stump came to the rescue. I really do love this painting. Like I've mentioned at the beginning, if I am going to turn this into stickers, I will leave out the background, leave out the big shadow, the larger shadow underneath the flower pot, and just cut around the leaves. So there's going to be more white, in the sense that in between the leaves, it's going to be white and not green. At least that's what I'm aiming for. Maybe I'll leave some of the background in there. I don't know. We'll see. But again, let me know what you think. If you think that a sticker sheet with these kinds of images will interest some people, I will list them in my Etsy store, of course. Oh, I added that dark grape as well on the flower pot, and I think it looks great. I really do. I mean, although it's not visible to the eye, I think it looks great. So there are the 3 paintings that I did, which are going to go to one of you patrons in the upper tiers. And that's it. Here's a better picture. The pictures on the videos are always so washed out. Anyways, as always, thank you so much, my awesome patrons, for supporting my art. It does mean so much to me. And I will see you soon. And don't forget to watch the upcoming vlog.